Well, now we're going to move to best practices for grading discussions. As we move from managing discussions to grading discussions, we really should experience a pretty natural flow because we were active during our management, so therefore we're going to naturally flow into the grading component of our workshops. We should really already have a pretty strong feel for how our students performed, as well as which students need some additional encouragement to perform at a higher level in future workshops. Now, a December 2015 version of a document called Minimum Expectations stated this about grading feedback. It says the instructor should use the assignment scoring criteria or rubrics as provided to assess grammar, mechanics, APA, and assignment content as applicable, giving direction on actions to take to improve the quality of future assignments. Also, instructors must include enough detail in their grading responses that the student can determine why any points were deducted. Well, the next sections of this video training are going to talk about how to be more effective and some best practices you can use in grading to give that feedback so students can improve. We're going to talk about the same concepts on the same three legs of the stool of consistency, objectivity, and integrity. First, let's talk about one element that deals with consistency. And that is it's good to develop a rhythm and to grade all classmates at the same time. Now, students want feedback as quickly as possible so they can make adjustments in future workshops. Just like a studying student, and all of us were students for many years, you should develop a pattern as the instructor and a rhythm for when you're going to grade so it's built into your schedule. Just like we tell students, develop a rhythm and a plan every week and develop it before the week starts in terms of how you're going to get your work done. If you pre-plan and set the time aside, you're much more likely to get it done on time, just like a student. So think back to those student days about how to plan your time. Now, discussion posts typically require a response by either day 3 or 4, as we see here from examples of particularly live courses. So your students need and want to know if their approach to discussions is working from workshop to workshop. So in other words, by the time they get to day 3 of the next workshop, especially if it's workshop 2, they would like to know if what they did in workshop 1 is suitable, acceptable, and if they're on the right track for how they're handling discussion posts. So therefore, it's important to get feedback to them quickly, especially in early workshops, so that they can make any adjustments they need to in terms of how they're approaching their particular style of response for both initial replies as well as replies to other students. Now, it's also important to get feedback quickly on writing quality, but that's outside this particular training. So I'm not going to suggest that you always grade discussions first because that would lead to feedback on written papers later than discussions, and you need to get all the feedback back to them in a timely fashion for all elements. So one possible pattern, this pattern that I happen to use quite a bit, is that in the first workshop, or at the end of the first workshop, during workshop 2, I'll grade the discussions first, because that's what they're typically going to work on in the next workshop right away, is the discussions, because they've got a due date of day 3 or 4. So then I will grade the papers second for workshop 2. That allows them to have a little more time to get their discussions done because, as we realize, they're probably going to move to their papers next. That gives the students the maximum amount of time to adjust their posts and how they respond based on feedback to workshop 1. Then in the third workshop, or during the third workshop, I might actually reverse that, so that during the third workshop, when I'm grading workshop 2, I'll grade the papers first. That gives them a little more time to get their feedback for their papers to improve their papers for workshop 2. And then in workshop 4, when I'm grading workshop 3, I'll reverse it back. So what happens is I've got a pattern in terms of when I do my grading, but I'm alternating from workshop to workshop what I grade first and what I grade second. So over the course of the course, the students get all of their feedback as quickly as possible. Now, another thing that's very important, if at all possible, is to grade all classmates on each assignment at the same time. Now, this is admittedly much easier for discussions because discussions don't take as much time to grade as papers. But what this does, it allows us to kind of be more objective and more consistent in our grading. Now, that doesn't mean that we should ever not go to our rubrics. Our rubrics are our guide. But we're also people. I'm not suggesting we move away from the rubric because the rubric is our objective standard. It simply means that we're going to be more consistent if we grade all the assignments at the same time. Now, in other words, we've got rubrics that talk about terms like clear critical thinking, competent critical thinking, or basic critical thinking. Our interpretation of that may vary from day to day based upon our mood because we are people. If we're grading all of our particular assignments at the same time, we're going to be more consistent. Now, for example, let's just take some real life examples and talk about some things that happen in our life. Let's say we've had a bad day at work, and all of us have bad days at work. me included, and we might be a little bit more sensitive to lower quality work. Or maybe we've got something coming up we want to do really soon in the next hour or two, and we're going to try and rush through the grading. Well, that's not a good idea in either case, but the realistic fact is we are humans and we do suffer the same emotional frailties of our students. So we need to first of all try to remove those distractions from our grading process, but also realize that if we at least grade all the students at the same time, any external factors of time or pressure or tiredness will be at least consistently applied. So we hope we do remove those, but realistically we know that there's always going to be those impacts around us. So another good point is if this is a new course to you, in other words, a course you've never done before, maybe a course you haven't done in a while, it might be a good idea to read 3 or 4 student assignments before you do any of the grading. That helps you kind of verify that your interpretation expectations to the rubric are reasonable. Again, I'm not at all suggesting you move away from the rubric, but your interpretation of comprehensive and complete versus limited versus basic will be consistent and more objective if you get a feel for what type of responses are coming into you. You may understand that, particularly if this is a course you haven't seen before and you're used to doing graduate level courses, that the expectation at an undergraduate level is a little bit lower. Or conversely, if you suddenly move to a graduate level course and your first couple posts are mediocre and you think they're great because you've graded undergraduate courses, then you get to the really good posts, you'll say, oh, wait a minute, this really is the graduate level comprehensive thinking, and those other posts were not. You can't really go back and lower those grades. So if you get an overview of what you're expecting, it will help you be a little bit more consistent.